as a board member, I don't want a surprise. And a breach, while you talk about it, is still going to be that surprise and that cost that somewhere wasn't expected. And to think that cyber insurance is always going to cover it is a different story today as well. So, boards don't want surprises. So you've got to, educate them. You've got to give them, information that this could happen, and then test. Most boards are saying, are we doing, penetration testing? But, they want more regular testing, of cyber exposure. They want more things like breach and attack simulation. Let's simulate this and show me the results. How do we respond? And so I think, the question is, we need to continue to educate and provide knowledge, but we need to test and be aware. And then also, don't pretend that it's not going to happen to us. It's just how do we respond to it?
Yeah, I think that is a mistake that often people make, is that that doesn't happen to us. We have the team and understanding that in the world of supply chain attacks and everything, you can do everything perfectly and still fall to a victim. Will, I'm going to come back to you now, because you finished up on talking a little bit about strategy, and I kind of really like the direction that you were heading in that. So from your perspective, what is the ultimate goal of closing the gap? What's at risk if we don't close the knowledge gap?
So in my opinion, the reason we need to close the knowledge gap is to prevent really in three different things: significant financial loss, trust to the company or the company's reputation, and then ultimately legal repercussions, right? We know that if you do not do what you're supposed to say or what you're saying you're doing, you will face legal repercussions. There have been CISOs that have been sued for right or wrong because they said they were doing something that they were not actually doing, right? And so the board needs to be aware of what their companies are doing or not doing. There needs to be a validation of that, right? And I think when we talk about validation strategy, what the board needs to see from these very security, technical-minded people is the strategy and the implementation and how they're dealing with the issues that are being presented to them from the business perspective. If you have compliance needs and you're HIPAA compliant, well, hey, how are we protecting our HIPAA data, right? I think at a minimum, we need to give the board the level of awareness to be cyber smart, right? I don't need them to be experts on everything, but I need them to know, hey, we're in this business and we're bounded by these compliance frameworks, which means we need X, Y, and Z. You need to be aware of the implications if something does happen comparative to the compliance requirements for reporting or whatever the case may be. We could face a significant financial loss if we do not do the right things the right way.
Yeah, and you touched a nerve there, I'm sure, with the the silos getting sued, because I mean this is a topic I'm sure we could we could talk a lot about it, the implications of that. Just to digress slightly, one of the challenges that I've faced in the past is trying to explain vulnerabilities to people and them not wanting to understand it, because basically they lose plausible deniability if they understand that they have a significant risk, if they don't understand it, then. But anyway,
right. I don't think that's and that comes out of the banks that they used to do that. They'll tell me plausible deniability. That doesn't fly anymore. And the problem is trying to explain vulnerabilities, because just because something's vulnerable doesn't mean that it's exploitable.
True.
Having that intelligence to exactly know what you're talking about.
Yeah. How many times do you guys also get asked, can you show me the return on prior investments? So that's one of the things that I get asked quite a bit is, how do we show, we've done all these great things, but what's the return on that investment? What's the return on the people that I hired, the tools that I've implemented, the services that I've acquired? Because if you're going to look for more, you got to show that you've had that return on the prior, things that you've spent in. We're more secure and we have less risk. And those are great ways to begin to do that. But I think that's also one of the challenges we face in closing that gap of education.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess, is that part of the ultimate goal for kind of closing this gap, is so that everyone can be aligned on that strategy, so that everyone, is aware of the actual implications of these breaches and the cost. And I feel like people shy away from that they don't want to always return things to dollars and cents, but we need to, and if we want people to relate to it, I feel like we absolutely need to.
I think it's more of a strategy gap than it is a knowledge gap.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right there. Yeah. And we can always turn to AI, right? We've been 30 minutes and we talked about that.
All right. Who had AI on their bingo card? That's another one that we can go through.
Free space.
Yeah, well,
Seriously, the strategy that I see, and I've written about this. I wrote a book about the military strategy, observer-oriented design and act, the OODA loop in cybersecurity. I'm publishing a blog tomorrow about entropy. That low entropy, that is cybersecurity. That's risk management. We have all these standards, all these frameworks. We're doing the same thing over and over. And we're really comfortable. It makes us feel good, and we can report to the board about that. But the bad guys, they have high entropy, very chaotic, and they're killing us. We spend all this time. I'm going through FedRAMP right now. It's going to be on my tombstone. Here lies Bob. He was FedRAMP ATO. And it increases the expense to the government's getting good companies, but does it really change the level? And I don't think it does. We are not as agile. It's an agility gap. It's not the knowledge gap.
Well, let's take Asaf. Do you kind of agree with this, that the knowledge gap? I guess you could even say the knowledge gap has led to the strategy or agility gap. Asaf, from your perspective, from what you're seeing in the tools and the hands-on kind of phishing campaigns that you've been running, do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I really agree with everything that's been said so far. Like it's a financial risk, it's a legal risk, reputational risk, of course. And I think when trying to justify the budget for cybersecurity, it's really hard to show that return if nothing's happened or if something's been prevented, because you're not always, you don't always know what could have been lost if it hasn't happened. And so it's kind of like the problem is showing not a return, but like a potential, time, money, reputation saved by implementing cybersecurity solution, whether they be technological or training, such as what we do. So, for instance, what one of our key features in that is we show analytics to CISOs, showing them how many employees clicked simulations, how many are considered high risk and stuff. So there's always like a picture of what's going on in the organization. But again, there's still a gap in what we can show. We can't say, if this employee had clicked, what would have happened? We don't know that, but maybe the CISO knows because they know the person, they know the department, stuff like that.
I think one of the things we've seen that helps is comparative analysis. So if you can show a comparative analysis, for instance, with phishing, if it's, hey, in all organizations, 28% of people click, in PCI, that's 50% of people. In, semiconductors or healthcare, it's 12%. So if you what's that?
You're giving me heartburn with those numbers.
Well, whatever it is, whatever the numbers are. But if you can show what we've been asked for a lot is comparative analysis to both industry and then peers in the industry. And then, how can I get better? So having that, full, as you mentioned, the OODA loop on how do you actually get better in the full cycle, I think, provides that level of comfort that Bobby mentioned earlier, and level of trust is, how do I trust the person that's, managing, our cyber risk is, how do they compare with the money that I've given them compared to others, and what are they doing? And how does that come all the way back, to, remediation and change?
Yeah. Yeah. And
can I add another potential risk with this knowledge gap if it's not closed, specifically for board members? Because they, a lot of board members reside in boards for several companies. And so it makes them a very juicy target for attacks. Because if you got one person with a lot of, classified information about a company, especially with regards to M&As and stuff like that, information that could be used in the stock market later on. So they become themselves very, very interesting targets for attackers.